Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. I'm so glad to see so many of you. We had one person at 11:30 and I was starting to panic a little because Jordan's fantastic, and so I'm glad we have so many people here. Our next Lunch and Learn is going to be in April. We're going to do something a little different, I think, with a panel and maybe working with the women's chapter of Silicon Slopes. So keep an eye out for emails about that. We'd like to thank Ben Labs for sponsoring our lunch. Through innovation and technology, machine learning, and AI-driven insights, Ben Labs empowers brands and creators with the means to reach advertising-wary consumers in authentic ways in the right place at the right time. Yay! Our speaker for today's Lunch and Learn is Jordan Morrow. Jordan is known as the godfather of data literacy, having helped pioneer the field by building one of the world's first data literacy programs and driving thought leadership. He is also the founder and CEO of Bodhi Data and currently is the Senior Vice President of Data and AI Transformation for Agile One. Jordan is a global trailblazer in the world of data literacy and enjoys spending his time traveling the world speaking and or helping companies. He has served as the chair of the advisory board for the Data Literacy Project and has spoken at numerous conferences around the world and is an active voice in the data analytics community. He has also helped companies and organizations around the world, including the United Nations, build and understand data literacy. Jordan is the author of 3 books, Be Data Literate, Be Data Driven, and Be Data Analytical. Jordan will be speaking today on data literacy in the age of AI. We'd like to welcome him to the stage and look forward to hearing from him.
I'm pretty loud, so I might put this down. Welcome. If you need at any point, I can't put it down. Am I being recorded? I will not put this down, I promise. So I have one rule when I do public speaking. How many of you like awkward silence? Liars, all of you. I like to interact. I don't like to just lecture. I would rather have a discussion throughout. I know we'll have open Q&A at the end, but I want to have a discussion, especially on a topic that right now, when you take a look at the state of AI and everything in the world, literacy is becoming a bigger topic. So I expect if I ask a question, interaction back, and if you don't interact with me, I'm just going to stand up here and stare at you until someone interacts back with me. So, fair deal that if I ask questions, we'll interact and chat. Okay, and it's good to see, I see Brenton over here at my side. It's good to, he's a former employee of me, and it's great to see him here. Let me introduce myself a little bit more. I'll first point out that nickname, Godfather of Data Literacy, I don't necessarily like it. I didn't give it to myself. I had someone say that to me once in a chat. You gotta love it when people give themselves these nicknames. I did not give it to me. I was in a meeting once with the person who is considered the godmother of data literacy said, "Do you know what they call you?" And I said, "Nope," and she told me that. I'm not a big fan of it. I do like the other one, Chief Nerd Officer. If you saw a Tesla out there that has Chief Nerd on it as the license plate, that's mine. So, but I do love data and analytics. I am the Senior Vice President of Data and AI Transformation for Agile One. I own my own company, Bodhi Data, and I do travel. I travel the world speaking about this. In fact, I was talking to Lindsay at the beginning, and I think starting like April 9th through June 13th, I have upwards of 10 trips throughout that time. So thankfully I have a great wife who supports this, and we'll go on a nice safari later in the year as a thank you. I've got 5 children. I do live in Utah. I live up in Bountiful, and it is actually very rare that I speak in Utah, so it's super nice to be able to drive down here today and talk through things. I do have 3 books out there. Well, I'll get to that picture in a minute. In fact, I just got an email. I was checking as you introduced me, Marin, and my 2nd edition of my first book, I think, is done. Thankfully, I don't have to write anymore for that one. And I'm also writing my 4th book right now. So I do love these topics, but I first want to start off with a funny story. Who knows who that is, who I'm with? It's Brent Spiner. What character did he play? How do you say it? Brenton? How do you say it? Data. Yeah, so Brent signed my 2nd book to Jordan. It's Data, Not Data, Brent Spiner. I got a kick out of that because I have been asked the question, do you say data, Jordan, or you say data? Personally, I don't care. I call it whatever you want. All right, let's talk about what I want to cover. We're going to go for about 40 more minutes, and I want it to be a discussion. I'm going to ask a lot of questions and hopefully get some good interaction. I want to talk about the world of data and AI right now, some of the state of it, kind of where things are going, how these things are intersecting for business objectives and business strategy. Then we'll define data and AI literacy and then talk about a few things individuals can do or businesses can do to kind of spur on success within these two spaces. So to start off, by show of hands, how many of you in this room went to school and got a degree in data or AI in some capacity? It could be statistics, could be mathematics, could be data, could be AI, any of it. 2, 3, maybe? We're sitting at Silicon Slope's AI chapter, having a lunch and learn, and only 2 or 3 people raised their hand on this, right? The reality is organizations right now, and I'll share some statistics in a minute on just how poorly they are doing with data and analytics and AI. And it's not because they don't have strong ambitions. It's not because they don't want to do it. A lot of it boils down to discrepancies between strategy, how do we apply these things to business objectives, which is the overarching purpose of all of this. John and I were talking, John Bradshaw and I, right before this, about how on one side you have data, AI, and technology. This other side you have business and strategy, and it is very poor communication between them. And you'll find this around the world. This is not a local thing. This is a worldwide phenomenon that we're seeing. And because of that, the adoption of these things struggles. The adoption of data tools, the adoption of analytical tools, and the adoption of AI right now outside of generative AI is not very successful. So we know that ChatGPT's big birthday, even though it was out before it, is November 2022. When did AI officially launch? Does anybody know what year? It's in the 50s, 1956, okay? And so generative AI, in your words, what did generative AI do for people? What are your thoughts?
I think it launched AI into the common world.
Common world, made it mainstream, right? And the reality is, in fact, I've recommended this book. Who knows who Mustafa Suleyman is? Lindsay should raise her hand because I recommended it to her. It's a great book. Mustafa Suleyman founded DeepMind. You might recognize that company, bought by Google, I believe. He wrote a book called The Coming Wave that launched when? September last year? I recommend it to everyone, okay? And I'll send a list, and I don't know if I can get the email list. I'll work with Marin maybe on this so I can send out some resources. But it's a fascinating book where he talks about this wave of AI that is about to sweep everything. Generative AI, I would say, is just the beginning of that wave because automation and RPA and all these different things that are going to occur matter. So, oops, no. There we go. I got to remember to scroll up. Who can tell me how many bytes of data that is? There are 21 zeros. Does anyone know? Megabyte, gigabyte? Not petabytes. Bigger than petabytes. Zettabytes. Okay, 21 zeros exist in a zettabyte worth of data. This prediction came out before ChatGPT launched to the world. This was a prediction from Statista.com that said by the year 2025, basically all the data in the world would make up that. What do you think occurred when ChatGPT launched? What happened to that number? It's gone up exponentially, I bet, right? Those models continue to learn. Businesses are investing in it. How far away is 2025? It's next year. Like, it freaks me out. I still think it feels a long way off. We're now less than 10 months away from when this hits. So now let me ask you a different question with regards to this number. Does the size or the amount of data matter? No. I saw a yes and no. Interesting. I'm going to tell you absolutely not. If you're using the right data at the right time for the right objective. And we'll get into, I call them my four rights of data. There's one more that we go into with this. And yes, the amount of data matters when it comes to quality, a good data governance, good management, because the more data that feeds an AI model, the more it can learn, the more it can do, right? But what happens when you put bad data in? You get bad quality out, right? We already deal with what I would consider quote-unquote good data with generative AI, and it delivers hallucinations where people cannot interpret it as well. So this is where data and AI literacy come into play. Let's look at some statistics on just how good we are with all of these things. According to Gartner, 85% of big data projects fail. 20% of analytic insights deliver business outcomes. Click, and I'll talk about them more in a minute. 11% of employers are fully confident in their ability to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with data. Gartner said 85% of machine learning projects fail. What are we seeing up here? What do these numbers tell us? Say that again? Yeah, well, not necessarily shit data, right? But bad quality. It could be bad data. It could be the fact that we have no idea what to do with the data. You can't just buy a tool or technology and think that's going to solve your data needs. What it really boils down to is my 4 rights of data, and we'll talk about them in a sec, but utilizing the right data to support the right business outcome is what matters. How many of your organizations that you know of has a data and or data and AI strategy? How many of your companies, raise your hand, have a data strategy? Like an official, documented, governed data strategy? Couple, right? How much money is being invested in these tools right now? Left and right. You know what I can't stand, and I have to be very careful because we're going to have vendors in here, but I can't stand poor data vendors. Because a good data vendor, I'll use Click as an example. That's who hired me and let me be an entrepreneur and said, go do your thing, do whatever you want, and that's where data literacy came from. Click will get a salesperson into an organization. How many of you know who Click is? How many of you have heard of Tableau and Power BI? The big 3 are Tableau, Power BI, and Click. Click was founded in Europe, hence more of a dominance in the European market. Tableau in the US, Power BI is worldwide, given the Microsoft combination. But any of those vendors will sit there and they can sell you a product because they can make that product purr. They can make that tool and technology look amazing. How do they do it? Any ideas? What data are you usually using if you are a salesperson demoing a tool? Demo data, not real data. And so if I'm ever talking to a vendor, I will make them test it on my own data. And if it can't look the way they want to make it look, sorry, right? If I can't make it look the way I want it to look. So we deal with this massive combination. Let me take a look at that 11%. How many of you, before coming here today, would have said, I'm a data literate person? Show of hands. Wow, so we're going to talk about that. Okay, the actual definition I use is the one I used while I was there. How many of you ever use your weather app on your phone to make a decision? That's data literacy. Models within a weather app, do you know how sophisticated those are? Even though they get them wrong at times, they are super sophisticated. Then you're using the data to make a decision off of that. That's data literacy. That's a data-driven decision. So to your point, yes, everybody has data literacy built into them, right? And now we need to expand it to data and AI literacy. But do we have comfort in knowing how to take data to insight to a decision? And that's where companies struggle. You can have great quality data. No one on the front end knows how to do anything with it. You can have very talented people on the front end, but horrible data on the back end. You can have everything in place, but you don't know how to tie it to a business strategy. And so this is where I actually spend what maybe a lot of my time thinking about. And so when I say organizational readiness for data and AI, what do you think that means? Any thoughts? Clean data? Absolutely. Have to have clean data. You do have to have good technology. What else? I come at it a little bit differently, and I'll tell you why in a minute. How many of you in January 2020 had on your bingo card, pandemic in March that'll shut the world down? How many of you in October 2022 had on your bingo card, new AI is going to launch and it's going to drastically alter the world? And by the way, it absolutely drastically altered the world. One thing that has to exist in the world of data and AI right now is a resistant mindset that can deal with disruption. So if I'm looking at an organization, and I'll talk about this later, what do you think the largest roadblock to data and analytical success is in an organization? Any thoughts? Mindset. It's culture. It's people. It is people, right? We're in an AI event right now, and we had 2 or 3 people raise their hand. I was at a data and analytics event for healthcare once. Out of 300 people, 30 to 50 maybe raised their hand that was their background. So we're investing millions, including in this point, billions is being invested in AI. And if we don't have people who can use it, it doesn't matter, right? And we submitted for, I had an award reach out to me and say you should submit or something like that. And they're talking about AI awards. And the way I'm attacking AI from a differentiation perspective has nothing to do with tools and technology. It's the entire workforce of Agile 1 having the skills to use tools and technology that I bring in effectively. And so we have to get this mindset and this ability to think through data properly. So we have mindset is key, ability to adapt and be agile, not agile methodology, but agile in our mindset. And iteration is key. So let's talk about my 4 rights of data. And you'll see, oh, the animation is gone. You even said, that's okay. I can talk through it. I use a PC. Sorry for any Apple fans. I'm a PC guy, and here we have, I wonder why it doesn't even pull up at all. I wonder if I hit spacebar. No, that's okay. We'll be great. They told me a PC wouldn't work here, so we tried to do it on the iPad. But there are 4 rights of data that matter in a decision-making process for a business or organization to harness the power of analytics and AI properly. The first one is it's the right data to utilize. So this goes to your point, data quality matters greatly. I don't care how good you are at data and analytics, if your data is poor, your output will be poor. You might be able to finagle it some, but without it, it's not going to work. So you need the right data for the right objective. What is the purpose of data? We're going to talk about this in a minute. Who can tell me the purpose of data? Help to reach a decision. That's it. We think of data and AI as these amazing things that might be sitting over here, but at the end of the day, data is there to harness so that your business can make better decisions. If you have a business strategy, a data strategy should say, to an effect, our data strategy is to use data to support the business strategy. That's it. Unfortunately, at times, a data strategy is sat separate from the business strategy. And when you do that, you could be doing all these things with data, and in the end, you're not able to tie them together to the business strategy. So you need the right data for the right objective at the right time. Okay, this is where I think you were shaking your head yes over here that the amount of data matters. Well, yeah, to a degree it does. The more that you can collect and store it, it's cheap and easy now with the cloud, right? You know, I still remember American Express days where the server sat in my boss in New York's office, and that thing would heat up, right? Nowadays, you just store it in the cloud and things are good, right? So you need the right data at the right time for the right objective. The 4th right is with the right data literacy, and we'll define that here in a minute. So we need to be thinking of it that way. Now, part of the problem boils down to when most people don't go to school for degrees in this, their comfort level within data analytics and AI is not very strong. If you were to go think about all your coworkers that you work with, and you were to go to them and say, I want you to utilize this data set, go find me some insight to make a decision. Would they be comfortable doing it? Majority of them aren't, right? We're going to talk about the 4 levels of analytics here in a minute and where a lot of people get stuck because there's a comfort in it. But the world of AI is evolving, and the way I speak about data and AI literacy, people have been asking me or might come to me and say, does everyone have a seat at the table? What do you think? Absolutely yes. And the moment we say no, we hinder our company. But it depends on where that seat is. In an organization of 10,000 employees, how many of those employees will be data and AI professionals by trade or title? Any ideas? 20 to 50. It's going to be a very small amount. But when you democratize data and AI to everybody, they all better have comfort in figuring out how to use it to make their jobs go easier. And we'll talk about how in a minute. Now, the fourth bullet point down is an interesting one to me. An example I have of a question I received all the way back in 2018. It's, I think, July 2018. It was in South Africa, and I was down there, and someone asked me, will all this data and technology make us lazy? What do you think? I think for some people it will, but it shouldn't in any way. It should augment us. Imagine that something and this is how I flipped the question on him. I said, imagine you had something that used to take you 3 hours to do, and now takes you 15 minutes to do. Is that 2 hours, 45 minutes for a nap? I've got 5 kids. I would like to, right? But no, it should be 2 hours and 45 minutes to dig in with more critical thinking to the data that is in front of you to make smarter decisions. The brain has a certain amount of capacity each and every day to do deep work. Does anyone have any idea how many hours that is? 4. Okay? Your brain has capacity to do deep work for 4 hours. This is not answering emails. It's not building a PowerPoint. This is shutting those things down and critically thinking. We live in a very distracted world. So the 4 hours comes from a book, and like I said, I'll email out all the books, by Cal Newport called Deep Work. A second book I finished in December is called Stolen Focus by Johan Hari. Anyone heard of that book? Brilliant book. On the back cover, you don't even have to dig into the book. It gives a metric. A teenager has a certain amount of time that they can focus on one task. I think I'm wording it right. Guess how long that is? Teenager. 90 seconds. Minute and a half. Now you're chuckling. Guess what the adult is? 3 minutes. That's how good we are at focusing on one task. So we have this divergence. We should be thinking more, critically thinking more on data and AI, how we prompt it, how we ask questions, the decisions we're making, but we live in a very overwhelmed world with data and technology and everything that is around us. How many of you have ever eaten at the Cheesecake Factory? How big is that bloody menu? How easy is it to decide what you want? It's not easy. But then you go to a fine restaurant and that menu becomes what? Smaller. Think of the 4 rights. Right data at the right time for the right objective with the right data literacy. So one of the things I'll share is, unfortunately, there's no easy button. Okay? I wish there was. Will technical skills become easier? What do you think?
Fulfilling certain technical tasks.
100%. Yeah, it depends on the task. In that book, The Coming Wave by Mustafa, he says, you know, everybody focuses on AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. Everybody know what AGI is? Yeah, the AI is doing exactly what I'm doing here. That's AGI. I like how he thinks, and correct me if I'm wrong, I recommended this to Lindsay, but he goes from AI, which we're seeing, to ACI, which is Artificial Capable Intelligence. To your point, certain technical tasks will absolutely be blown out of the water. If I needed to hire 20 data engineers in the past, I might only need 5 at this point. But they better be good at interpreting the code and the results that my technical AI is delivering for me. So what it boils down to is, how do we enhance skills and everything in the AI space? I'm actually going to go through this quick. This is my checklist. Sorry, I'm guessing the Mac kind of framed it different. That's okay. When I talk organizational readiness, I look at data strategy, data literacy, which is essentially the skills gap, the skills that people have. Tools and technology have to be there. The culture of the organization, and consider the why being the mindset, the mentality that the organization has. So, as we continue, we talked about there is a purpose to data, and this is it, okay? Data is all the data your organization collects. But one thing about data is data needs something to bring it to life, if you think about it. Data's just data. It literally will just sit there until something acts upon it. And the thing that can act upon it is human or machine. All right? And that's what analytics is going to do. And we'll talk about all 4 levels. You'll see it right there. It's peeking up on us. The 4 levels of analytics in a minute. But what analytics is trying to do is utilize that data, bring it to life. Think of the 4 rights of data to give us insight and information so that it can then lead to decisions and outcomes. That's it. I think we get so caught up. I was speaking in London, at Big Data London last September, and when you walked around kind of the booth area, vendor after vendor after vendor after vendor was there, all doing what could be amazing things. But if I want to look at vendors, for me, it's that last piece. If I'm looking at a data and analytics vendor, I'm going to ask you, this is my strategy as a business. How does your tool get me there? That's the conversation. I don't want demos. I don't want any of that. I want to know, how do we get to that decision? How do we get to that outcome? How does that operate through all 4 levels? What training and education do I need to bring to people from both a tool perspective and non-tool? Let me ask you, is training a person on a dashboard the same as training them on data? Not at all. Right? I can train you where to point and click in Excel, Tableau, Power BI, all of those. But I need to train you on how to do the 4 levels of analytics using AI and your human intuition and skill. So let's talk about those 4 levels of analytics. And apologies again, normally there's a picture here. There are 4 levels: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive. Those are the 4 levels. And what you see on the outside of what I normally have on the circle is, number 1, descriptive analytics is your observation, your what is happening. Diagnostic analytics is why that occurred. Predictive analytics is what you think, it's a prediction. Prescriptive analytics is let the machine do the talking. Let's use a quick analogy on the 4 levels of analytics. I want you to all imagine that you're sick, not feeling well, and you go to a doctor, and the doctor says to you, you're sick, leaves the room, and never returns. How many of you want to go back to that doctor?
When they were open those first 4 hours of the day.
Yes, absolutely. With 5 kids, I had a kid at the doctor yesterday. How many of you want to go back to a doctor that just says to you, you're sick, leaves the room, and never returns? Guess what most businesses are doing from an analytics perspective? This is what happened last quarter, move on. Okay? 90 to 99%, I would say, of companies, this is where they're stuck, or this is where their comfort, maybe not stuck, this is where their comfort lies. So then the doctor says, you're sick, here is why. They give you a diagnosis. It's a diagnostic analytic. Because the doctor will then say, you're sick, here's why, if you do this, you'll get better. And sometimes you get a prescription to fix yourself. That's a prescriptive analytic. So if descriptive analytic is where most companies are stuck, where do you think they invest most of their money? Prescriptive and predictive. And guess what area is left by the side, but is, my opinion, the most important level of analytics? Diagnostic. Because when you know why things are occurring throughout your data, you better be able to make better predictions. But how many people are comfortable digging in, doing deep dives into data to figure out why things are, at least come up with theories to why things are occurring? Those, absolutely. Those are the people I'm hiring in a heartbeat. Those that dig deep, those that dive in, they figure out. Are doctors always right? No. Is data and analytics? No. Right? Predictions come out all the time that are not good. Data and analytics cannot be a set it and forget it thing. It needs to be a set it, iterate on it, iterate on it, iterate on it, just like doctors do. All right, let's talk about how nerdy I am, and I'll go to right to this one to do it. The previous slide, I have what I call the tri-data of being data-driven. How many of you remember the video game Zelda? What did Zelda have that had tri in the name? The Triforce. I literally stole this from the Triforce. I changed the image, which you couldn't see. I can't have Nintendo suing me. But there are 3, we'll look at it this way. I'm trying to see if there are any stools in here with 3 legs. But if not, we'll just use the analogy. Imagine sitting on a stool where one of the legs has a crack in it, or is not supporting it or broken. How safe is that stool going to be? Not very, right? You don't necessarily want to sit on it. In the tri-data of being data and AI driven, there are 3 key things. There's data and AI driven problem solving, data and AI driven decision making, and then data and AI driven execution. That 3rd leg of the stool is the one that is forgotten the most. We can build cool visualizations, we can get data quality where we want it, we could do all these things, but if we do not execute upon a decision, what good is it? Right? I want us executing, creating new analytics over and over and over again. So let's define data and AI literacy. I've got 2 definitions. The first one is data literacy is the ability to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with data. That's the definition I've used for years. It was the one we used at Click. While we were there, we modified it a little, but this is kind of the one that has stayed. Notice what term is not on there. AI or data science. Does everyone need to be a data scientist? No, very few. Less than 1% need to be data scientists in an organization. But everyone needs to be comfortable with their data literacy skills. Now, one reason I think data literacy became what it was, I never would have imagined. When I started to build this all the way back in 2016, my idea was, let's just build analytical learning for the masses. That was it. I gave it away for free. I didn't charge for it. And it took off to where it is today. One reason I think that was, back in October 2012, did anyone go to Harvard? I'm about to rip into Harvard, so let's not offend anyone. Okay. Harvard came up with a quote in October 2012 that said the sexiest job of the 21st century is what? Data scientists. So guess what companies went out to do? Hire data scientists. Did they have any clue how to use them? No. Now, I'm okay with it because it helped foster, I think, the environment where data literacy is successful, but we still run into that problem today. Leaders hire data professionals, and they don't see success. What's the average tenure right now for a chief data officer? This might be European or it might be worldwide, the percentage. Either way, it comes across the way it should. Now, it's more than 12. Average tenure of a chief data officer is only 30 months right now, 2.5 years. That's it. Is it because they're not good at what they do? Maybe some. It could be that they can't tie to business strategy very well, but I would counter it's also the moment you hire someone thinking that's going to change the world, you've missed the point. We have to develop full data and AI literacy throughout an organization. All right, so what is AI literacy? Well, you can look up there and you can see. I'm just going to simplify it. That's DataCamp's definition. It's essentially AI literacy is the effective use of AI. That's it. Right? It's ethical, it's effective, it means you can prompt it means you can evaluate the responses, and then you can execute on a decision. Combine those together, and that's what organizations should be doing to close the skills gap to ensure that they can succeed with both data and AI. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go, I'll stay on this slide. The next two slides I talk about, though, we know that the purpose of data and AI essentially is to help drive outcomes and decisions. We know that. But the reality is we have to help people understand that data and AI are supportive tools. That's it. Right? When we overthink what these things are for, yes, can they do amazing things? Absolutely. Vector databases, large language models, all these things are cool, what they can do. But in the end, it's there to support us. At one point, a microphone was this sexy, cool new device, right? That's how we need to be thinking about these things. These are things that are roles and support throughout an organization. Now, we talked about this earlier. I usually have an image. I'm fearful it's not going to pop up, so I won't pull it up. But there are different roles within a business that are data professionals or data users, right? You have a chief data officer. You could have an AI officer, although I think those should be together. You have machine learning engineer, data scientist, data analyst, ML ops, all these different roles. And you have a data consumer. Which out of all those roles is going to be the largest portion of a population? The consumer, right? That consumer needs to develop a confidence and a comfort in using data and AI throughout their role. So let's pull that up. So how can we become better? And then we'll go through this section, then we can open it up for any questions if you have any. These are my pillars of driving a better data and AI-driven culture to make it succeed. So if you're working at your organization trying to figure out how you could get a community and your organization to do this, look at these 6 different pillars. Number 1, it's creating data fluency or the dialogue of data. How many of you, if I said the term Markov chain analysis, know what a Markov chain analysis is? 2, 3? If I say the word probability, how many of you have a good idea of what probability means? Yeah, everybody. What is Markov chain analysis? Probability, right? All it is the change of terminology to get the masses on board. But if I go into an analysis or I go into a large meeting and say, oh, check out my cool Markov chain analysis, I'm going to get a deer in the headlights. This is data fluency. It's empowering people to have good, strong conversations around data and AI. Now, There's a flip to this. How many of you have used or seen the tool Alteryx before? It's a data science tool. It democratizes data science is one way, at least in the past. I was with the CEO of that company once, and I asked him, I said, how many data scientists would you have present to your board or to your C-suite, something like that? What do you think his response was? 0. Just put his hand up and did this. Now, I don't think that's fair. There are data professionals who can communicate. I hope I'm one of them, right? But the reality is that the thought is not lost. Business side of the business has a hard time understanding data terminology. The data side of a business has a hard time understanding the business terminology. We have to create good common data dictionaries and business dictionaries so people can understand it. Number 2, we've talked about iteration. Do not have data and AI be a set it and forget it. The moment you forget about it, it's not going to work. When I was at American Express, now I'm going to date myself, not that my white hair doesn't do that enough, but what happened in the United States in 2007 that literally sent the world in a spin? The recession. The housing bubble officially happened August 2007 is when I believe they say it burst or something. That's the official start time. I took a role at American Express analyzing delinquency rates and write-off rates. And we had predictive modeling, descriptive modeling in there. But I inherited a report that was 70 plus PowerPoint slides long, 70 plus. The majority of those slides, we're talking all but maybe 2 to 5, linked to charts in Excel that I had to send out multiple times a month. What a waste of time, right? This went to senior leaders, I think, at the company, including the chief risk officer. I eventually iterated that report down to 6 total visualizations that they could look at on their phone. Saved me a headache, because if you de-linked your PowerPoint from Excel, it was a nightmare. That's iteration. How many of you have ever wondered why you're doing the work that you do? Or how does anybody use it? Have you ever tried to not send something and see who barked at you? Do it. If you don't know how people are using your report, or if they are, stop doing it and see who gets mad. If someone gets mad, shoot, you just say, sorry, I'll bring it back, right? Iterate in your work. DNA of data is a big one to me. A lot of people are fearful of AI and data. It's overwhelming. There's a lot out there. Where can people start, right? How do you get going? We're not trying to turn everybody technical. The moment we try and do that, we're going to fail. You can't boil the ocean. And so what we need to do is weave the DNA of data throughout, create a data community at your business. Learn fast is a big one for me. How many of you have a company that has the slogan, fail fast? How many people at your company say it? Hopefully no one. I hate that slogan because no one believes it, right? If someone works on a project for 6 months and that project doesn't succeed, how many of those people get a big bonus? That's a shame, because if you're evaluating a data project correctly throughout, you might have 30 learnings from that data project, even if it doesn't succeed. I'm then going to implement all 30 later. That's where learn fast should come into play. Then finally, data skepticism is big for me. Question everything, please. You see a data point, it doesn't mean it's wrong, but create within everybody at your company. How many of you are comfortable questioning your CEO with data? Start to. That's the data culture that we need. Personal pillars of data and AI literacy. For me, ongoing skill enhancement and understanding. I read constantly. I'm helping Lindsay in her career path. I probably send her way more than she ever needs, and it's not going to stop, sorry. So, but read and study and learn as much as you can. You have to have adaptability and be able to change. If you're a data professional, please study business principles and start to understand them inside and out. Because your whole goal is not to be a data professional, it's to be a business professional who's good at data and tying data back to the business objectives that are there. If you're a data engineer, get really good at architecting the modeling that is going to help the front-end analytics. If you're a data scientist, get really good at modeling and analytics that helps drive decisions. Communication and interpersonal skills are really big. I've been asked to mentor college students who are doing data degrees, and they ask me what courses should they take. What courses do you think I tell them? Communication, leadership, project management. It's like your degree is going to do a fine job teaching you principles of data and analytics. If you enter the workforce, I can look at a resume and say, you've got the data skills. I can see it. Now let's ask some questions about your interpersonal and soft skills. and figure out how their mind operates to see if they're a fit. And then finally, one of the key things you could do is seek out mentors and guidance. I'm not going to talk about change management. It's a big one. It's actually gaining, I think, more and more momentum. Change management has to accompany data and AI projects. If you're implementing a data and AI project at a company and it doesn't have change management associated with it, stop where you are and get change management to sit on top of it, right? I know people don't like the term, but if you're not monitoring feedback loops, if you're not monitoring how it's rolled out, the adoption rates and those things, you're going to fail to a degree, I would bet. Here's how I tell people to get started with data and AI literacy. I call them the 3 C's. Originally, it was for data literacy, and you can couple it now with AI literacy. Be more curious, be more creative, and critically think on the data. That's where you start. Curiosity. Who would you say, how can I phrase this without giving it away? Who would you say are the best data literacy detectives in the world? Any ideas? Kids. Why kids? They ask about everything, and what were you saying? They ask why. What happens to us as adults? We think we know it all. We're given work and assignments, and we don't question it. I don't know why anybody in the world did not question a PowerPoint presentation that is 70 slides long with linked charts on 90 to 99% of those slides and say, can't we do this differently? And if they did ask that, why did they not push for it to be done differently? My senior vice president saw what I did. He's like, why aren't we sending this? It's like, hallelujah. I don't have to worry about delinking and doing that. Be curious. Be creative. How many of you would consider yourself creative in here? Everybody should raise their hand. Right? There's a longitudinal study out there. I think it was 1,600 kids were studied at age, I want to say 5, 10, and 15. At age 5, what % of those children tested at a genius level of creativity? Any idea? 98. Almost 100% of children tested at a genius level of creativity. At age 10, what % do you think it was? I think it might have been around 30. And then you get to age 15 and it drops down to like 15%. 200,000 adults, it might have been at the end of that study, were studied at age 31. What % tested at a genius level of creativity? 2. We go from all these children testing at a genius level down to adults. We stop. I don't know why. I think we need to bring back creativity. In fact, if you study AI right now, creativity might be one of the biggest things that I look for if I hire an AI professional. I need to know that they can be creative in how they're using that tool to create better outcomes for my business, right? Creativity. And then critical thinking. You have 4 hours a day of deep work. And I'm a guy who gets up and I read, I journal, I work out. Brenton might remember this about me. I'm a very early riser. I like 5 a.m. is pretty on par, if not earlier sometimes. But I guarantee I don't get 4 hours of deep work in a day, as much as I would like to. I have 5 children. I have a busy job. Life gets busy. What are some ways you think you could develop better time to do these things? Any ideas? Time blocking. How many have heard of time blocking before? How many of you do it and block your calendar? Do you put meetings in there that say, my time? Do it. Do you ever set, how many of you shut down your computer? If you want to try something to make people uncomfortable, it's kind of funny. Schedule an hour for your team or your coworkers. Tell them to show up at this room, but they're not allowed to bring their cell phone or their laptop. Watch how squirmy they get, right? Because that's what we're used to. But shut it down, put a problem on the board, handwrite it, and say, this is what we're studying today. Spend an hour just talking about it and watch how many creative solutions come to life because there's no distraction. Remember, adults are at 3 minutes on one task. Now imagine you have one problem you're focused on as a team, and then you say, all right, let's go find data that can help drive these things forward. So there's different things. One of the final kind of things I want to make sure we understand is I am a massive believer, and you'll hear me talk about it, that the human element does not go away. Now, that does not mean jobs will not be replaced. In fact, if you look at some metrics out there, the number of jobs that could be reskilled or replaced is gigantic. I think Fortune came out with a prediction for this year, 15% of the world's jobs, 400 million could be wiped away. Doesn't mean jobs aren't going to be created, right? But things are changing. So we need to make sure that we are using data and AI literacy skills to balance out the use of these technologies in our careers. We need to create these skills within people. I'll go through my 5-step plan real quick because I know I'm right on time and we can open it up if there are any questions. But these are my 5 steps that I tell any organization or business that they can do, either as an individual, a business unit, or a totality, what you could do. Number 1, don't start with technology. Start with your outcome in mind. What is it that we're trying to do? Are we trying to use AI for X? Are we trying to use data for X? Am I trying to learn a new skill? Whatever it is. Set your outcome, and number 2, build a strategy to achieve that outcome. Then once you have a strategy to achieve the outcome, do you have the right tools to do it? Because if you don't, why are you even going for it until you have them? Step number 4 is making sure you have the right skills to use the tools to achieve the strategy, to achieve the outcome, right? Number 5, make sure your environment is in place to help it happen. With 5 children, one reason I like to be up early to read is number 1, it's going to be less busy and less noisy. Number 2, if I try and read at the end of the day, I've had the whole day on my mind, it's harder for me to concentrate. So the environment I set up for myself to read and develop from a personal perspective a lot of times is my early morning time. Any questions on the 5-step plan? So what I'll say real quick, there's resources. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I am an open book with all of this. Like, for example, helping Lindsay, I don't charge. I am happy to share, mentor, do what I can. I work with companies around the world on this. I work with my own company on it. Got 3 books out. Like I said, I'm very happy to hear that I don't have to edit my first book. We're putting out a 2nd edition of Be Data Literate. Guess what we put into it? AI. It launched in when? 2021? Before generative AI. I went through with the help of my editor and we added AI into it. And then my 4th book is supposed to come out in December. So with that, thank you. Any questions? If not, go enjoy more pizza. Yeah. Anything not clear, anything I can expand on? And if not, it's totally okay. I'm not offended. Yeah.
I'm curious if you're running into companies that are doing it correctly. What I tend to see is that they just know that they're missing the deadline. They hire some people to go do the AI and not really
No. So the question is, have I come across a company that I've either worked with or whatever, and the answer is no. Guess one company I help with data literacy that you would think is pretty darn data driven? Amazon. Well, before I went to Click, who helped me with data literacy, I was getting recruited to Google to do what I did at American Express because the person who went from American Express said their data was worse than American Express's data. So it's not that, I do agree. I think too many organizations are either hiring one person or hiring some people or buying a tool and then saying, do it. That's not going to do it, right? You have to hire the right leader who knows how to strategically put it together and has to be so frank up front before they even start, and they need to figure out it sounds funny, what kind of budget they will have. You can't hire a person and expect them to move a mountain without money. I mean, it sounds super funny, but what I have found is this balancing scale, where on one side of the scale is the desire of these companies to do this, and it's weighed down massively. On the other side is the investment or the buy-in, and it's like this. You can't solve it with that. So there's a lot that needs to occur for this to work. Problem is, I was asked the other day, I'm going to take your question a step further, was maybe last week I was doing something virtual, and someone asked, what about small to mid-sized companies? I fear for them, big time. And the reason is you've got Amazons, Walmarts, Targets, all these massive companies that have so much money to throw at this, that if small to mid-sized companies don't understand that I don't even need your data strategy to be more than a dashboard. If you don't have a dashboard, your data strategy is build our first dashboard. Wonderful, but you're doing something, and then you're iterating. It's those that don't do anything, I absolutely fear for them. Back here.
So a problem that I've encountered a lot at organizations is the leaders of the companies will either not know what their strategy is, and then they'll say, let's build out a data team so that they can help us answer the questions, when it's hard for them to look introspectively and not really have a clear strategy of what they want to do.
Yeah.
Or secondly, that they have an opinion, they've gotten to where they are perhaps through survivor bias, right? And they're looking for data to support their opinion, as opposed to ask the question and let the evidence indicate the opinion.
Yeah.
And so along those spectrum of problems, what have you used to help you?
So it's interesting. You bring up a very interesting point. I've been asked, how do you get buy-in? Buy-in is very difficult at a lot of companies for them to truly get leaders who buy in, which is essentially what you're talking about. They either buy in and know they have to do something, so they're strategic on how they hire, or they buy in knowing that, oh, I've gotten here, but I'm not going to be good. But what you see the majority of the time is not that. What I tell companies to do is bring in an outside voice to talk to them. And the reason is, if you try and reason within, it's like, I've got my 5 children. If I tell my 5 kids to do something, they might think, never. Grandma tells them, they're going to listen. Same thing in a business. If it's an internal person pushing the message, be like, I've been here 20 years, I've gotten here on my own, why would I listen to this? You bring in the outside voice and just say, just listen. That's one thing to do. Another thing is proof of concept. Create a library of use cases that prove things out. Doesn't have to be big. 4 to 6 different use cases that say, we applied data here, this is the success, this is the attribution, this is what it led to. And the final thing is helping them understand that you're not trying to get rid of that experience. I'm not trying to get rid of 30 years of intuition, of gut feel. One thing that I try and do is I actually classify intuition as gut feel as personal data, because it's stuff they've learned over time. Last year in May, I was out in Scotland with Scottish Fire and Rescue, of all organizations, brought me out to do a data literacy event with them. And I've come up with an example that says, imagine you're a firefighter and you're at a fire and you hear this popping noise, and 8 out of 10 times that popping noise meant the floor was to collapse. So your gut feel says to go. What they're not computing in their mind is that's data points that you have learned, so they don't call it that. So I try and help them understand all of that is great. I don't want to get rid of it. What if I can now bring this in to help support it? But you better have an objective mind, to your point, where they don't push it away. And that's where data literacy helps. Yeah.
This is kind of more of a practical question around moving people to a better understanding of lagging versus leading leaders. And so it's more on the data interpretation side. But I've never been in an organization that actually is like a 4D organization that's really
Gets it.
thinking about leading and lagging
Yeah.
measures. But then you say that, they're like, well, these are leading measures.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, they're not.
No, they're not. It's data literacy. And yeah. I would create a program without using the term lagging leading. I would create a data literacy skills gap program in an organization. And one of the key things you can do is assessments to see where the gaps are, and you create right learning paths. But you're right. It's frustrating, right? One of my favorite laws in statistics is Goodhart's Law. Has anyone heard of Goodhart's Law? Do you know what it says?
Yeah, any measure that becomes a target ceases to
Yeah.
be a measure.
Man, you might be the first one I've ever met who could define it that way. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. That's what you're talking about, right? Look at Wells Fargo. Sorry if any of you work for Wells Fargo. When they told and awarded or rewarded their branches or whatever by total accounts opened, that's a good measure. They made it a target, and so they fraudulently were opening accounts and were hit big time. So, if I get to a company, I don't want to set a target for revenue. Revenue is a lagging indicator. The leading indicator is going to be how many calls did you make? How many appointments did you set up? Who did you visit today? That's what I'm going to set up to then take a look at the outcome that it drives. And then what you do is every quarter, I call it an iteration week. I'm going to evaluate what we put in place, and if it's not working, well, that lagging measure is going to let me know. But it all comes to your point, it's the education. So it's how do you create a program without offending people? I mean, let's be honest, people, this is not their space. So connect with me and I'll give you some ideas on practical ways to do that. And props for knowing Goodhart's Law. It's a fantastic law. It's my favorite. Yeah.
Can you give an example of creativity in like working with data? Like how can you be creative?
Data storytelling, right? Everybody's heard of data storytelling, right? So the power, so what is the best sense? Like humans have different sense, touch, smell, hear, sight. What's the most powerful? Well, from the senses, it's your eyesight. Visual, right? How many people want to look at a massive data table with 200,000 rows and 50 columns and say, find me something? They don't. So creativity comes in, how do you craft a data story that enables an individual to find insight, right? I'm a big believer that I'm going to have 1 or 2 or 3 slides that make up my data story and then an appendix that has all the supporting material. I think a lot of times we create these massive PowerPoint decks. You might have been able to tell in my slides. I apologize. I should have formatted it for a Mac. But I don't put a lot on there because that's not the story, right? If I'm telling a data story, I might only have 3 or 5 data points, 2 to 4 visualizations, and then my call to action. That's it. Oh, you want more than that? There's the supporting document in the appendix. I'm not going to walk you through it. You can read that on your own. Creativity and data storytelling. Creativity in how you use AI and prompt it or evaluate it. Creativity in the analytical methodology you're using to figure out why or creating theories. That's creativity. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Right on time for you, Marin.